Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's that time of year again. It's time to kick off NFL Power Rankings. I think this is the earliest in the season we ever have done it. We're going to be talking a little bit about week 4 of the games coming up as I go over each team. I'm also going to talk about the weeks that have already happened so far this year. MLB Power Rankings are over, so if you're normally a guy that is on this channel for MLB content, that is still going to happen. We're still going to be doing the MLB playoff predictions, some playoff content as we go along. But it's a little bit time to talk about some football, and the weekly power rankings for football are back. We're going to be doing them every Wednesday, which is going to be the day before the Thursday games, kind of previewing the upcoming week, talking about who's playing who, as well as ranking the teams, which is realistically the best part. We are doing our next giveaway at 1,500 subs, so maybe you're new here, completely just here for football content. If you're one of the 1,500 subscribers, when that happens, I'll be giving away a hat of choice. Normally I'm wearing an MLB hat. Maybe time to start an NFL hat collection. Otherwise, guys, we're going to jump right into it at number 32. Don't really think there's much option. Sure, they had a nice big win, 36-22 over Vegas this past week. Andy Dalton came in there and kind of shown that maybe the Bryce Young days are over, but I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. Every time Andy seems to come into a new team and has a couple new teams over the past few years, he does manage to seem to win. That first game looked really good in that first game. We'll see how he does this upcoming week. They're going to be playing a revenge match kind of for him in the Cincinnati Bengals, so I'm going to be excited to see that. But realistically, if they can keep what they are doing this week going forward, they're probably not the worst team in the NFL. Someone else in this bottom row is going to make a good argument because there are some 0-3 teams, and we'll get to that in a second. Number 31, I have the Chicago Bears. They lose 21-16 over the Indianapolis Colts this week, and for me, I watched that game somewhat closely. I think, was that the Thursday nighter? I can't quite recall off the top of my head, but it was just like giving the ball back and forth. Both these teams' quarterbacks really didn't seem like they wanted to win very much. But at the end of the day, I think the veteran having Jonathan Taylor was kind of the difference in that game. The Bears fall a little bit short. Caleb Williams, he's not looked amazing. Of course, he's a rookie. He's going to have a lot of growing pains. He's still getting his feet under him in this league, but it seems like some of the throws are quite far off. He's given up some interceptions already. And realistically, they're 1-2, and they probably should be 0-3 if it wasn't for that Tennessee game on the first week. Number 30. They play the Rams this week. I think it's going to be a good game when they play the Rams, actually, because the Rams are quite depleted. We'll talk about them relatively soon. Number 30. New England, 24-3. I think we finally saw the New England that everyone expected to see in week 1 when we took Cincinnati in our survivor pools, but only 3 points against a Jets defense that has been top tier for a number of years now. And I think with that loss, it's pretty much cemented that they're going to be last place in this division. Very well by the end of the season, and by my predictions right now, are going to have the worst record in the AFC as well. And that's rightfully so. They're kind of going to be working Brissett for the first few weeks here, probably around week 8. They're going to switch over to their rookie quarterback, and we're going to see what he's capable of. But again, it's New England. Not a whole lot of promise, not a whole lot expected. And I think this week kind of showed what's going to happen. They have San Fran on the road this week. It's going to be a tough week for them. They're probably going to fall to 1-3. Next up, the 0-3 Tennessee Titans. They lose 30-14 to the Green Bay Packers. For whatever reason, if you're following a spreads guy in this situation, they were favored, and maybe rightfully so. The first 2 weeks of the season, they kind of gave the game away both times. Coming to this one, they're up against Malik Willis as the backup quarterback for Green Bay, so not a lot of expectations. They thought they were going to do it, but 30 points they've given up. They only put up 14 of their own, and they fell behind and didn't really look back after that. So Tennessee now 0-3. They now have a chance to get their first win on the next coming Monday night. They're going to be playing on the road against the Miami Dolphins. A situation where they might be able to take advantage of a quarterback situation that we'll talk about in a little bit. Next up, the next 0-3 team. Believe it or not, these guys are in the same division, right? And the Jacksonville Jaguars really came out and showed that they're in a lot of trouble this past week, losing 47-10 against the Buffalo Bills. Now they're going to go on the road. They're going to play division rival, the Houston Texans, and that's not been a great matchup for them for the most part, for the past couple of years. Sure, they take some wins here and there. But Jacksonville, I think, is now on a 9-game losing streak if we date back to last year. A lot of concerns here. Trevor Lawrence just has not looked great. And at this point, being 0-3 behind the 8 ball, lucky for them, other teams in their division have somewhat struggled. No one's kind of looked super dominant. We're going to talk about the other teams, of course, along the way here. But Jacksonville got a lot of work cut out for them, and it starts this week when they're playing Houston. Number 27, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, and some people are going to argue that this team should be a little bit lower, possibly because they just lost to Carolina. Not exactly been the best season for them, but they've managed to steal some game along the way here, and rightfully so. They sometimes look good, but Gardner Minshew, of course, making his start for this team has not been super consistent, but that's the story for him. I think relatively, if we match them up against most of these teams, I'm thinking the outlier on the Carolina Panthers, but maybe not. We're only 3 weeks in, so arguably could have them lower. Vegas, just a little bit lower. I don't even know. I feel like I called them Oakland at the beginning of that. Sorry if I did. Number 26, I have the same division, Denver Broncos, coming off with their first massive win this week against a team that was doing pretty good, 26-7 over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're going to go on the road, face a tough Jets team next to really see if they can continue this kind of momentum. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be hard for this team. It's one of the youngest teams in the NFL. I do believe on average they are the youngest team in the NFL. And it's going to be a pretty big growing year for them, right? With Sean Payton coming in there, they're trying to make some steps forward. And this week really demonstrated that this team is going to be no slouch. And I think Baker Mayfield and that found out what they are capable of. And yeah, number 25. Moving up a couple of spots, maybe 21-16 over the Chicago Bears. I already touched on the game a little bit, that it was pretty rough. Anthony Richardson does give me a lot of concern. I think he's thrown the most picks, it feels like, at least. I don't know for sure in the NFL so far this season. I know the week before he threw 3, and I know he threw at least 1 against the Chicago Bears. They're going to have their work cut out for them in this coming week. They are at home against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who is going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at Anthony Richardson here. Whether or not they can handle it, I don't think they can at this point. They are going to have a lot of growing pains. Lucky for them, this division is already fairly weak on this board, so they are going to pick up a few wins here. Are they going to be on the fence like they were last year from playoffs? I don't think so, but it's very possible. Next up, one of the teams that I think has cost the most people their survivor pool across the board, losing this week to the Washington Commanders 38-33. That Monday night one was absolutely epic. They lose the first week of the season to the Patriots. Some people might say, oh, they're 0-3. They should probably be lower. I think when we see what they played like against the Kansas City Chiefs, you kind of expect this team to be a little bit better. They haven't exactly shown. The offense was definitely there against the Commanders, and I think Commanders pleasantly surprised a lot of people that they're going to be a little bit better of a team than they were last year. And the Bengals, just a rough start. They've been starting 0-2 at least for the last number of years, and now 0-3. They're really behind the 8 ball. Lucky for them. Baltimore, they're probably their biggest competition in this division, even though we know the Steelers are 3-0. It started at 1-2, but we'll talk about those teams in a bit. They do get Carolina, so they should be able to get this back on track going into next week. Number 23, I do have the Miami Dolphins, and maybe you could think that they're going to be lower, especially after this past week. The performance they had against Seattle was just not good. 24-3. The whole Tua concussion thing is a lot of concern for a lot of people, right? And whether or not he's going to be back, when he's going to be back, should he even be back? And the Dolphins don't really have a good backup. There's a lot of expectation now that Tyler Huntley really is going to take the ball on Monday against Tennessee. And honestly, as a Dolphins fan, that's what I am hoping to see when they signed him and brought him in once Tua went down. I was like, I expected him to really start. He looked pretty good in Baltimore in the times he filled in for Lamar, so expect Miami to have somewhat of a better time. If Tua was in there, they'd obviously be doing better, but they have not looked good the past 2 weeks since Tua went out. Number 22, just a bad week for this team, and it's not been a great time for them really all season long. They are now 1-2 on the season. They got somewhat embarrassed, in my opinion, by the New York Giants, 21-15, and a lot of people picked the Browns to cover that one in their survivor pool. and they fell short. And Myles Garrett is now having issues with both his feet, which is going to pose a long-term problem. They do at least have a big bounce back situation. They are at Las Vegas Raiders next week, and expect them to be able to pull that win out and go 2-2. Otherwise, they're going to be way behind the 8 ball. This division is starting to not look like the North I had predicted at the beginning of the year. Number 21, I do have those said. New York Giants that I just talked about beating Cleveland, and was it neighbors, guys, that just absolutely tore up the Cleveland Browns. I know in a lot of previews I watched of that game that people said just shut down neighbors and he should be all right, and I kept thinking that, and then he just kept getting like a ball. The guy has clearly been a number 1 pick for this team, and him and Jones seem to have a pretty good connection going on, and of course he seems to be a generational talent on the wide receiver end. It's going to be a good impact for the Giants so far. I think if they would have had their kicker in week 2 against Washington as well, we could be looking at a 2-1 team, but not having the kicker, they always had to go for it on 4th down, and kind of created an ugly situation. Number 20, picking up their first win of the week with a big 10-point comeback against San Fran, 27-24. They managed to upset San Fran there, and didn't really see that coming, honestly. I thought the 49ers should walk away with it. Both those teams were dealing with injuries, and the Rams, of course, significant ones to their 2 wide receiving core with Kupp. And the Rams do get a little good of a break here to be able to go back-to-back wins. They're playing the Bears. I think that's a situation where even if they're depleted a little bit on the offensive side of the ball, the Bears' defense is scary, but they should be able to pull this one out. Right now, they're middle of the pack. I wish they had more of their wide receivers. They might be able to move up, but right now this division has shown a little bit of upside downness to me, at least so far this season. Number 19, I got the LA Chargers. They lost 20-10 against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week, and I think the big story there is Herbert just going down with his high ankle sprain continues to kind of be an issue. He was questionable coming into this game, then he gets hit again. Now he's questionable again, and I think the expectation really now is he's not going to be able to play at least top, and people are just going to focus on that ankle when they do play, especially when they're playing Kansas City this week. They want to try and make up some ground in this division. They want to play against the Super Bowl champs, but with Chris Jones and those guys in there, I expect kind of him to take a seat this week, rest that ankle, because this is a tough game to win to begin with, so you don't want to risk the rest of your season in this game. That's kind of what I would expect to happen. Number 18, I'm pleasantly surprised watching this team as of late. They've played a good year, and honestly, they've had a tough schedule playing the Bills and Detroit, and losing this past week to Detroit. It kept it close, and they kept the Bills close, 20-13 now, and they absolutely blew out the Rams. So overall, maybe I have this team ranked a little low. The wins aren't compiling yet. They're not winning against the top teams, so maybe that's going to hold them back a little bit. The one thing, of course, as well, is last year they were bottom row all season long, and to really start moving up the board, you got to at least show some sort of consistency, and we haven't really seen the winning ways of Arizona yet. Marvin Harrison Jr. has been a big impact player there already, and I'm excited. It's fun watching this team. It's just nice to see them back. I like the matchup this week. I think this is one of the week. This is maybe the matchup of the week. They're going to be playing the Commanders. Just absolutely fun to watch him and Kyler Murray and Jaden go head-to-head in a quarterback duel. 2 guys that like to run. It's going to be fun to watch that one. Number 17, the Dallas Cowboys. Just not a great start for the Cowboys. That looked good in week 1 when they beat the Browns, and then it started to fall off a little bit, and they tried a massive comeback against Baltimore, fell a little bit short. Now they're 1-2, and I don't know if Dallas fans are panicking yet. Maybe it'll be time to panic if they lose this Thursday night or tomorrow against the New York Giants. That's going to be a fun matchup. We got an up-and-coming Giants team. Will they be able to match this team that has had their number for the most part over the last number of years? There's been a quite big discrepancy in those 2 teams over the last number of years, so it's going to be fun to watch them play tomorrow. Number 16, I got Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and 26-7 against Denver. After a big win the week before against Detroit, it's a little bit disappointing to watch Baker Mayfield and them kind of throw up a goose egg with 7 points against Denver. Sure, I think they went into Denver, so it's always difficult when teams travel to Denver. I think people forget that it's such a big difference going a mile high. If you see big spreads in that situation, it's often very important to take Denver. I think the Buccaneers were 7.5-point favorites at that game, so just something to keep in mind if you're one of those guys looking at spreads and stuff and picking games and pools and stuff like that. But coming up this week, it's going to be a big chance for them to bounce back against the Eagles. an Eagles team that has always had their number a little bit ahead of them in the playoff race every year, the past number of years, but they will have the advantage that the Eagles are a little bit beat up. Number 15, I do have those Washington Commanders we talked about relatively recently. They're playing Arizona this week. I'm really hyped for that game, by the way. 38-33 over the Cincinnati Bengals, and we saw a rookie dominating this Monday night against the Cincinnati Bengals. He showed everything he was possibly made of and set some records, I'm pretty sure, along the way there with rushing yards, at least on the ground for a rookie quarterback over the first 3 games. I think he was up there with Lamar Jackson. I'm just pulling things out of my butt right now, but I do remember seeing that on the board. Washington's got to be pretty excited with how things started 2-1 so far this year. Shouldn't be too much of a surprise. It looks like Jaden's fitting in there nice and well, and now they got Eckler, and they have McClure has someone finally throw him the ball. Terry Mack? I'm going to get his name wrong, but Terry. Washington Commanders looking good. If you're a Commanders fan, I think you have a bright future ahead of you here. Number 14, I have the Houston Texans. They play Jacksonville next week, so I think they're going to really look to make something. It's a really important game for both those teams, and for me, Houston really got blown out by the Minnesota Vikings, and for me, Minnesota Vikings has been that team that surprised me the most. They just keep blowing teams out, so I'm not holding out too much against them, but at the same time, Houston really hasn't gotten a whole lot going this year in terms of offense. I don't think they've put up over 20 points in any of their games yet. They barely squeaked one out against Indy in the first week, and I'm pretty sure they kind of barely squeaked one out against the Chicago was it Monday? They only didn't even cover 6. So Houston just not blowing teams out and not getting that offense that kind of expected them to. Now that Jacksonville got Buffalo to put up all those points, I'll be interested to see how the Texans do. Not having Mixon this past week probably played a big impact on them, and I know he was a big part of this offense. I'm not sure his injury status, but check that out if you're looking at that game. Number 13, I have the New York Jets. 24-3 over New England. The Jets have the benefit of finishing 3rd in their division last year, so they are going to have a little bit of an easier schedule. They are going to play a little bit of the other teams that are in the lower bracket of this board, as opposed to if you're a team that's typically in the top half of this bracket, you're going to be playing top teams more often. Jets, just to go off that, are playing Denver next week. I believe they are at home too, and it looks like I wrote them down as at home, so that's going to be a big impact. The Denver isn't going to get that home field advantage. Look for Aaron Rodgers to continue to roll after losing the week 1. Number 12. I think this is the worst record on the board this high. Everyone else, I think, has a higher record. Just speaking out of my butt. But Atlanta has not had the easiest road of things. They played Pittsburgh week 1, which a lot of people picked Atlanta. But Pittsburgh has an offense, and Cousins was just getting used to his team still week 1, and et cetera, et cetera. Then they have Philadelphia, which they have an epic comeback against. And then they have Kansas City, which arguably, if you watch that game, could have went either way with some calls near the end of that game with pass interference, etc. Could have changed the outcome. But Atlanta has had a 1-2 record, but still looking relatively strong. They got to be pretty confident with how this offense is going to figure it out. I think they're going to figure it out. It's been a little bit of a slow start, so maybe it's a little bit of me just thinking and not exactly anything to go behind it. They are playing New Orleans this week, which is exciting because I have New Orleans at number 11 on this board. After the first 2 weeks of offense just being absolutely dominant, they brought it back down to earth a little bit here with 15-12 loss to the Eagles, and I think we're going to see a little bit more of that over the next bit. Carolina to kick things off for the beginning of the year, and then Dallas, who's kind of been exposed as not having the best defense as well. So now that they're playing teams, and this is going to be, I think, going to be the matchup for the division lead. Tampa Bay is not too far behind, but I think after what we just saw this week, it's more realistic that we're going to see New Orleans and Atlanta battling for that top spot. Number 10, 3-0 on the year, but still only number 10. I'm not ready to just launch them up the board. Their schedule has not been the hardest. They haven't really been tested extremely yet. 20-10 against the Chargers this past week. They have an upcoming game on the road against Indy, so really they could be 4-0 and it's still waiting for a top 10 team that they're going to be tested against. But this defense is something. And we've seen Mike Tomlin continuously have winning season after winning season. He's pretty much set himself up for a layup for that to happen again this season. So I'm not going to discount him. I'm going to start moving him up the board if they continue to look dominant, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I'm just ready to see some offensive dominance. Like, so far, Justin Fields has given them what they needed to win, and maybe that's all they need. But will Russell Wilson get his chance back in there, or will they keep rolling Fields there? If you're winning, why would you not just keep rolling Fields? Number 9. Falling down probably the most on this board over the past couple of weeks, San Francisco just not looking like the dominant self that you would expect them to be. Losing 27-24, that's now their second loss they had now against us. NFC team, and you would have thought they were going to dominate the NFC coming into this season. A lot of the same guys that were there for Super Bowl last year, of course. But, of course, McCaffrey on IR, not having that weapon in the backfield is going to make a big difference. Not super excited with how they blew this lead this week against the Rams. So, took a little bit of a hit, and I'm not ready to really be sold on them yet because they're struggling, and I'm not sure if they are going to right the ship. We're going to see what happens when McCaffrey gets back. Of course, you get a get-right game against New England. If they fall there, we're going to be talking about some serious trouble in San Francisco. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens. I did consider having them higher on the board, but then the fall in Dallas had me a lot concerned, and we talk about it a lot on the Discord channel about just how Baltimore has blown fourth quarter leads a bunch over the past couple of years. On top of that, they were very close to going 0-3. Very possible to go 0-5 for this team, which is not a good start for this Baltimore Ravens team, a team that was top of the league last year in the regular season at the very least. They do have a big test again this week going with Buffalo. So I want to see how they bounce back. Sure, they won. They haven't looked great. They've had a really tough schedule, but they lost the Raiders, which they shouldn't have lost. And they lost to Kansas City on opening night. But guys, Baltimore still seems like they should be able to get that to order. But I just want to see them close out games without it getting sweaty like it has been. Number 7. They've managed to just win back-to-back games without their starting quarterback, Jordan Love, 30-14 against Tennessee. And the big test coming this week against Minnesota, the team that they're going to be battling, I think, in this division. Well, not the only team, a new team. You would have thought it would have been just Detroit at the start of the season, but now Minnesota has appeared as well, and now that this leaves them number 3 in their division and number 7 overall, which just goes to show how I'm feeling about the NFC North right now. But yeah, so far looking good since Willis took over. They looked good in Brazil against Philly. Like, they very well could have won that game too. So not holding too much against Green Bay right now. They have a lot going for them. Number 6, I do have those Philadelphia Eagles. If it wasn't for that choke job, they would be 3-0 against Atlanta. The thing that's really holding them down a little bit on the board for me is the wide receiver injuries now. And I believe they just got Lane Thomas as well, just got out too. So like the injuries are starting to pile up for the Eagles. And without A.J. Brown, without Devontae Smith, are they going to be able to have the offense? Sure, they just pulled out a 15-12 win against New Orleans Saints. But this week coming up, they do have Tampa Bay, again, a team that has shown times. They do have a little bit of offense this past week, not so much, so maybe it'll be a close. But Eagles, I think 6 is solid. Very well could be higher on a lot of people's boards. Number 5, I have the Detroit Lions, and they've looked pretty good. If it wasn't for the loss to Tampa, they'd be 3-0. So Detroit had a nice solid win this past week as well. 20-13 over Arizona. They're having a massive Monday night game, and it's going to be against actually number 4 on this board, which is actually, I'm just going to throw them up now, Seattle Seahawks. They're going to have an epic game, and just based on this is how you can kind of sometimes see. I love doing the matchups. This is how I'm predicting how things will go. So in theory, based on this board, I'm predicting Seattle to come out ahead. They won 24-3 against Miami. Their defense has been spectacular so far, and has led them to a 3-0 record, which puts them on top of this division where everyone else is 1-2. So they already have a 2-game cushion, and if they can beat the Lions here, it's going to be a very big statement game for them. DK Metcalf had a breakout game, I think, against Miami this week. But it was Miami, a team that's a little bit struggling, going from east to west, in the 12, like Seattle. This is a statement game for them. I think this is Seattle won this one last year. I'm pretty sure it was around week 2. And I remember because Survivor, my friend had Detroit to beat Seattle. And Detroit lost. So it's a rematch from last year. Keep your eyes on that. Number 3. I do have this is just a shock to me coming in this year. If I had them up here, I would have been like, no way. But it was hard not to. Their defense has just been absolutely dominant. No questions asked there. 34-7 against Houston. We saw them dominate San Francisco. We saw them dominate the New York Giants in the week one. It's just been domination after domination. And a lot of it has to do with their defense. But at the same time, Sam Darnold has been reborn here. And I know he somewhat has a bruised knee, I think it is. But he did end up playing the game. I think he's expected to go this week as well. It's going to be super important for him to go because here playing Green Bay, and that's just goes to show the NFC North is massive. Number 2, after a dominating win on Monday, I have the Bills sticking at number 2 on the board. Arguably, a lot of people could argue they can be number 1, but if you have been a fan of this channel for a while, you know you go to number 1 because A, I'm just gonna put them up there. They won the Super Bowl. And B, they haven't lost since then. So they stay on number 1. I know there's been a little bit of sweat, but just to finish off with Buffalo, they have the Sunday night game against Baltimore. It's going to be an epic game. Is it going to be if they lose, do they fall? Probably, because one of these teams is going to go 4-0 probably. But will it necessarily mean Baltimore passes them? Not necessarily. It really depends on how the game plays, and that's why they play the games. What we watch, we never know how it finishes, right? It can be basically a tie, come down to a field goal. It won't be the thing that pushes over the edge. Then we get Kansas City, a team that they win. They're 3-0, but so far every single game seems to have been a sweat, maybe except for the Baltimore game. So a little bit of dominance there, but could have easily lost Atlanta, could have easily lost to the Bengals, who were looking pretty dominant in those games, but they are 3-0, and they maintain their spot at the top of the board. So there you guys have it. First NFL power rankings of the season. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what you're most excited for. What is your matchup of the week coming up? For me, it's Arizona-Washington. That's the one I'm looking most forward to. Of course, we have Seattle, Detroit. That's going to be massive. Green Bay, Minnesota's going to be massive. Baltimore, Buffalo, all those games are going to be massive, but for me, I'm looking forward to that one. So comments below. Otherwise, guys, like, subscribe. We'll see you for that next video.